The rain fell mercilessly on the cardboard shelter that Maya had constructed beneath the overpass. At 23 years old, she had learned to make herself invisible in a city that seemed determined to look through people like her. Her clothes, donated and worn thin, clung to her shivering frame as she huddled deeper into her makeshift home. It had been 3 years since the fire that claimed her parents and their small apartment, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a debt she could never repay. The streets became her classroom, teaching harsh lessons about survival, trust, and the thin line between life and death. Every morning, Maya would wake before dawn, fold her few possessions into a weathered backpack, and begin her routine. She'd wash her face in the public restroom at the park, then head to the soup kitchen on 5th Street, where volunteers served breakfast with sympathetic smiles. Afterward, she'd spend hours searching for odd jobs, cleaning storefronts, holding signs for local businesses, or collecting cans for recycling money. The work was inconsistent, and the pay barely kept her fed. But Maya maintained something precious that the streets hadn't stolen: her dignity and her hope that tomorrow might be different. One particularly cold evening, Maya noticed him. Everyone in the neighborhood knew about the madman who wandered the commercial district. He wore expensive clothes that were now tattered and filthy, spoke in riddles, and sometimes screamed at invisible enemies. Most people crossed the street to avoid him, but Maya saw something different. Behind the wild eyes and incoherent rambling, she noticed moments of profound sadness, fleeting clarity that suggested someone was trapped inside that fractured mind. His name, she learned from whispers, was Marcus, though no one knew his story or where he'd come from. Their first real interaction happened by accident. Maya had just received a donated sandwich from a kind stranger and was saving half for later when she saw Marcus being harassed by a group of teenagers. They circled him, mocking his appearance and throwing pebbles, treating another human being like entertainment. Something in Maya's chest burned with anger. She marched over, her small frame insignificant compared to the teenagers, but her voice was steady and firm. "Leave him alone," she commanded. Perhaps it was the conviction in her voice or the shame of being called out, but the teenagers scattered, laughing nervously as they went. Marcus stared at her with those haunted eyes, and for just a moment, they cleared. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice surprisingly gentle and educated. Maya offered him half her sandwich without thinking. They sat together on a bench as rain began to fall again, two invisible people in a world that had forgotten them. That small act of kindness created an unexpected bond. In the weeks that followed, Maya began seeking out Marcus during her daily wanderings. She'd share whatever food she'd managed to gather, and he, in his more lucid moments, would recite poetry or discuss philosophy. These fragments of brilliance only deepened the mystery of who Marcus really was. Winter arrived with brutal efficiency, and Maya found herself spending more time near Marcus, partly because he'd found a better shelter spot beneath a heated vent outside an old hotel, and partly because his presence brought her an odd comfort. Despite his condition, Marcus never made her feel threatened. In his clearer moments, which seemed to be increasing, he spoke with such eloquence that Maya suspected he'd been educated, perhaps even wealthy, before whatever tragedy had stolen his mind. She began to look forward to their conversations, those rare windows when the fog lifted and she could glimpse the person trapped inside. One night, as temperatures dropped below freezing, Maya made a decision that would change everything. Marcus was having a particularly bad episode, shivering violently and muttering about demons. Without thinking about consequences or propriety, Maya huddled close to him, sharing her blanket and body heat. She'd heard stories about homeless people freezing to death overnight, and something in her refused to let that happen to Marcus. As she pressed against him, she felt him gradually calm. His arms, almost instinctively, wrapped around her, and they held each other through that bitter night, two souls finding warmth in unexpected places. The morning brought awkwardness and confusion. Marcus seemed more coherent than usual, his eyes focused in a way Maya hadn't seen before. "You stayed," he said simply, and she nodded. Something had shifted between them in that long night. Over the following weeks, Their relationship evolved beyond simple companionship. They became partners in survival, watching each other's backs, sharing resources, and providing comfort in a harsh world. Maya found herself drawn to Marcus in ways she didn't fully understand. Beneath the madness, she saw glimpses of kindness, intelligence, and a wounded soul that resonated with her own pain. Their physical intimacy happened gradually, then all at once. It started with hand-holding for warmth, then sleeping pressed together for survival. But one night, in the darkness of their shelter, something changed. Marcus was having a rare extended period of lucidity, and as they lay together, Maya saw him truly seeing her, not as a fellow homeless person, but as a woman. The kiss, when it came, was tentative and sweet, tasting of desperation and loneliness. What followed was neither planned nor wise, but it felt inevitable. In the darkness, two broken people found a moment of connection, of feeling human and wanted. For a brief time, they weren't homeless or crazy. They were simply two people seeking comfort in each other's arms. The reality of their situation came crashing back with morning light. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions: shame, confusion, tenderness, and fear. What had they done? Marcus retreated back into his fog, leaving Maya wondering if he even remembered. She told herself it was a one-time occurrence, a moment of weakness brought on by cold and loneliness. But over the next few weeks, it happened again and then again. Each time, Marcus would emerge from his mental prison just long enough to be present with her, to make her feel seen and valued. Maya knew it was complicated and possibly wrong, but in a life devoid of comfort, she couldn't bring herself to stop. She convinced herself that she was helping him, that her presence brought him peace. The truth, which she barely admitted to herself, was that she was falling in love with glimpses of a man she might never fully know. Maya first noticed the changes in her body 6 weeks later. The nausea that woke her every morning couldn't be blamed on bad food from dumpsters. She'd been surviving on the streets long enough to know the difference. Her breasts felt tender, and her period, never regular but usually present, hadn't come. Panic seized her chest as the realization crystallized. She was pregnant. In her situation, this wasn't just complicated. It was potentially catastrophic. How could she bring a child into this life? She had no home, no income, no stability. And the father was a man who barely knew his own name most days. For 3 days, Maya kept the knowledge to herself, weighing impossible options. Abortion crossed her mind, but she had no money for the procedure, and the free clinics had waiting lists. Adoption seemed more feasible, but she'd have to survive the pregnancy first, and being visibly pregnant on the streets meant increased vulnerability. She'd heard stories of pregnant homeless women being attacked, assumed to be easy targets. The rational part of her brain screamed that she couldn't keep this baby, but another part, one she didn't know existed, had already begun to love the tiny life growing inside her. When she finally told Marcus, he was in the middle of one of his episodes, arguing with invisible figures. "Marcus," she said firmly, taking his hands. "Marcus, look at me. I need you here right now." Something in her voice must have penetrated because his eyes focused on her face. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "The baby is yours." She watched his face carefully, seeing emotions flicker across his features too quickly to identify. Then, to her amazement, tears began streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice clear and full of anguish. "I'm so sorry. You deserve better than this. Better than me." In that moment of clarity, Marcus told her fragments of his story. He spoke of a company he'd built from nothing, of billions in the bank, of a life that seemed like a fairy tale until a car accident 2 years ago left him with a traumatic brain injury. The doctors said he might recover with time and treatment, but without identification or anyone to claim him, he'd ended up on the streets where his condition worsened. His family, he had none. His company, stolen by a business partner who declared him dead. His wealth, inaccessible, without proof of identity. Maya listened, not knowing whether to believe this tale. Was it truth or another delusion? Marcus himself seemed uncertain, his clarity fading in and out like a weak radio signal. Even if that's true, Maya said gently, it doesn't change our situation now. We need to figure out what to do about this baby. But Marcus had already retreated back into his mental fog, rocking back and forth and muttering about quarterly reports and board meetings. Maya felt more alone than ever. That night, she sat by herself, hand on her still flat stomach, and made a decision. She would keep this baby. She would find a way to survive, to get off the streets before her pregnancy became obvious. She would protect this child with everything she had. The odds were against her, but Maya had survived the impossible before. She'd survived the fire, survived 3 years on the streets, and somehow, she'd survive this too. This baby would be born into better circumstances than its parents currently lived in. She swore it to herself and to the tiny cluster of cells that would become her child. Desperation drove Maya to seek help from places she'd previously avoided. The homeless shelters had always felt unsafe to her. Too many predators, too much theft, too little privacy. But pregnancy changed her calculations. She needed prenatal care, protection, and eventually a safe place to give birth. On a gray Tuesday morning, Maya walked into St. Catherine's Women's Shelter with Marcus shuffling behind her. The intake coordinator, a middle-aged woman named Helen with kind eyes and practical manner, listened to Maya's story without judgment. When Maya hesitantly mentioned her pregnancy, Helen's expression shifted from sympathy to determination. "We can help you," Helen said firmly. "We have a program specifically for pregnant women. You'll get a bed in our secure wing, 3 meals a day, prenatal care, and counseling. We'll help you get identification, apply for benefits, and plan for your future." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes, the first tears of relief she'd cried in years. But then Helen added, "However, we can't take him. This is a women's shelter. He'll need to go to the men's facility across town." Maya's hand instinctively grabbed Marcus's arm. After all they'd been through, she couldn't imagine abandoning him, even for her own safety. Marcus, in one of his increasingly frequent moments of lucidity, squeezed her hand. "Go," he said clearly. "You need to think about the baby now. I'll be fine." But Maya saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt. The men's shelters were rougher, more dangerous, especially for someone in Marcus's vulnerable mental state. She was torn between her own survival and loyalty to the father of her child. Helen, sensing Maya's hesitation, made a suggestion. "There's a program at City Hospital. They work with homeless people who have serious medical conditions. His mental state qualifies. They can admit him for evaluation and treatment. He'd be safe there and you could visit." The next few hours passed in a blur. Helen made calls, pulled strings, and demonstrated the kind of bureaucratic competence that Maya hadn't known existed in the social services world. By evening, Marcus was admitted to City Hospital's psychiatric wing, and Maya had a bed in St. Catherine's secure unit. As they wheeled Marcus away on a gurney, protocol for psychiatric admissions, Maya felt her heart breaking. He looked so small and frightened in that hospital gown, his wild hair and beard making him look even more lost. "I'll visit tomorrow," she promised, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. Her room at the shelter was smaller than a prison cell, but to Maya it felt like a palace. A real bed with clean sheets, a small nightstand, and a door that locked from the inside. She had safety, privacy, and for the first time in 3 years, a sense of stability. That night, lying in actual bedding with a roof over her head, Maya allowed herself to cry. She cried for the parent she'd lost, for the years on the streets, for Marcus and his broken mind, and for the uncertain future of the child growing inside her. But mixed with the sorrow was something else. Hope. Against all odds, she was taking the first steps toward reclaiming her life. As she drifted off to sleep, one hand resting on her abdomen, Maya whispered a promise to her. "Unborn child, I'm going to give you the life I lost. Somehow, I'm going to make everything right." The hospital became Marcus's unexpected salvation. Dr. Sarah Chin, the neuropsychiatrist assigned to his case, was a specialist in traumatic brain injuries and their psychological aftereffects. During her initial evaluation, She noticed something the emergency room doctors had missed years ago. Marcus's madness wasn't schizophrenia or primary psychosis, but rather symptoms of a severe brain injury compounded by malnutrition, exposure, and lack of treatment. His brain has been trying to heal itself in the worst possible environment, Dr. Chen explained to Maya during her first visit. It's remarkable that he's maintained any lucidity at all. Treatment began immediately. Marcus received MRI scans that revealed the extent of his injury, a fractured skull that had healed improperly, putting pressure on his frontal lobe. The doctors couldn't perform surgery to correct the old injury, but they could treat the symptoms with medication, therapy, and proper nutrition. Within 2 weeks, Maya noticed dramatic changes. Marcus's episodes of confusion became shorter and less intense. He began to remember things more clearly, including fragments of his life before the accident. He remembered his name, not just Marcus, but Marcus Theodore Blackwell III, founder and CEO of Blackwell Technologies. Maya sat by his bedside, listening to him piece together his past like someone assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. He remembered his company, a tech firm specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. He remembered the car accident, a drunk driver running a red light, his vehicle flipping 3 times before landing in a ravine. He'd crawled out with a head injury, concussed and disoriented, and wandered away from the scene before emergency services arrived. Without identification, his wallet thrown from the car, he'd been treated as a John Doe. The brain injury affected his memory and cognitive function, and by the time he could have sought help, he no longer remembered that he needed to. "There's a company with my name," Marcus said one afternoon, his eyes more focused than Maya had ever seen them. "If I could prove who I am, if I could access my accounts, everything would change." But proving identity without documentation was nearly impossible. His fingerprints weren't in any criminal database. His face, now hidden behind years of beard growth and weathered by street life, wouldn't match any old photos. Dr. Chen suggested contacting the company directly, but Marcus hesitated. "My partner, Richard, he told everyone I was dead after I disappeared. He took control of the company. If I resurface now, he'll fight me every step. I need to be stronger first, more coherent. I need irrefutable proof." Meanwhile, Maya's pregnancy progressed. The shelter provided regular prenatal checkups, and for the first time, she saw her baby on an ultrasound screen. The technician pointed out the tiny heartbeat, the developing limbs, and confirmed what Maya had suspected. She was having a girl. In that moment, watching her daughter move on the grainy screen, Maya felt the full weight of her responsibility. This child deserved more than survival. She deserved opportunities, education, and stability. Looking at Marcus recovering in his hospital bed, Maya dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could give their daughter the life she deserved. If Marcus really was who he said he was, if they could prove it, if they could reclaim his life, their daughter wouldn't just survive, she'd thrive. It was a long shot, perhaps an impossible one, but Maya had learned that impossible didn't mean unattainable. It just meant they'd have to fight harder. Marcus's claims seemed increasingly credible as his mental fog continued to lift. Dr. Chen documented his progress meticulously, noting that with proper treatment, his cognitive functions were returning to near-normal levels. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Patricia Rodriguez, became invested in his case and began conducting her own investigation. She started with newspaper archives from 2 years ago, searching for missing persons reports or unusual circumstances involving anyone named Marcus Blackwell. What she found was both encouraging and disturbing. Marcus Theodore Blackwell III, tech entrepreneur and billionaire, had indeed disappeared 2 years ago following a car accident and was officially declared dead after 6 months. Patricia brought this information to Marcus and Maya during one of their daily visits. There was a memorial service, she explained, showing them printed articles from technology magazines and business journals. "Your business partner, Richard Chen, gave a eulogy. He claimed your body was never recovered from the ravine, but after 6 months of searching, the courts declared you legally dead. Richard inherited control of Blackwell Technologies through a clause in your original partnership agreement." Marcus stared at the articles, his hands trembling. That clause was only supposed to apply if I actually died, not if I was simply missing. The more they investigated, the more suspicious Richard's actions appeared. Within weeks of Marcus being declared dead, Richard had restructured the company, sold off several divisions, and accumulated personal wealth that seemed disproportionate to his actual stake. "He's been looting my company," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Everything I built, he's been dismantling for profit." Maya watched the transformation in Marcus with mixed emotions. As he regained his mental clarity, the gentle, vulnerable man she'd come to care for was being replaced by someone harder, more focused, a businessman plotting his comeback. Proving Marcus's identity became their primary focus. Patricia contacted a lawyer specializing in identity recovery cases, a sharp woman named Jennifer Kim, who took on their case pro bono after hearing their story. Jennifer's approach was methodical. First, obtain DNA samples and medical records from before the accident. Second, locate witnesses who could testify to Marcus's identity. Third, compile financial records and corporate documents that only the real Marcus Blackwell would know about. The hospital kept samples of Marcus's blood for DNA analysis, which could be compared against any samples from his previous life. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chun, reviewing Marcus's medical scans, noticed old fractures in his left arm that had healed years before the car accident. A quick search of medical databases revealed that Marcus Blackwell had indeed broken that arm in 3 places during a skiing accident 7 years ago, and the fracture pattern matched perfectly. Additionally, Marcus still had a small metal rod implanted from that old injury, something that would appear on X-rays and could be definitively linked to the original.
Surgery.
"This is our smoking gun," Jennifer said excitedly. "This kind of evidence is nearly impossible to fake." Combined with his detailed knowledge of company operations, his improving mental condition, and testimony from Dr. Chun about his brain injury, we have a strong case. As the pieces fell into place, Maya felt increasingly conflicted. If Marcus truly reclaimed his identity and fortune, what would that mean for her and their baby? Would he want anything to do with a homeless woman he'd met during his lowest moment? She'd seen how he was changing, becoming more polished and controlled each day. The man planning a corporate comeback seemed very different from the confused soul who'd held her through cold nights. One evening, as if reading her thoughts, Marcus took her hand. "None of this matters without you," he said quietly. "You saved my life, Maya. You saw me as human when everyone else saw garbage. When I get my life back, and I will get it back, you and our daughter will be part of it. That's not negotiable." Maya wanted to believe him, but she'd learned that hope was dangerous. Still, watching her belly grow and feeling her daughter kick, she allowed herself to dream of a future where her child would never know hunger, never know cold, never know the fear that had defined Maya's last 3 years. After 3 months of treatment, Marcus was ready to be discharged from the hospital. His transformation was remarkable. The wild-eyed madman had become a focused, articulate individual who bore little resemblance to the person Maya had first met. With regular meals, proper medication, and therapy, Marcus had regained almost all of his cognitive functions. His memory, while still spotty about the years on the streets, was crystal clear regarding his previous life, his company, and the details that only the real Marcus Blackwell would know. Jennifer Kim, their lawyer, had prepared a comprehensive legal strategy for his return to society and his claim to his former life. The first test came when they decided to contact someone from Marcus's past, someone who could verify his identity without alerting Richard Chun. After much discussion, they chose David Nguyen, Marcus's former CTO and closest friend. According to old articles, David had resigned from Blackwell Technologies 6 months after Marcus's disappearance, citing personal reasons. Jennifer's investigator tracked David to a small tech startup in Portland, where he'd been working as a consultant. The approach had to be careful. If David was loyal to Richard, their element of surprise would be lost. Maya accompanied Marcus to Portland, her pregnancy now visible at 6 months. Jennifer arranged for them to accidentally encounter David at his favorite coffee shop, a place his social media posts revealed he visited every Saturday morning. Maya's heart pounded as they entered the small cafe. Marcus, now clean-shaven with a proper haircut and wearing donated clothes that actually fit, looked almost unrecognizable from the man she'd first known. They spotted David at a corner table, absorbed in his laptop. Marcus's hands were shaking. "What if he doesn't recognize me?" he whispered. "What if I'm wrong about everything?" Taking a deep breath, Marcus walked over to David's table. "The Wilson Protocol," Marcus said quietly, speaking a phrase that meant nothing to Maya. David's head snapped up, his face going pale. "That's impossible," David whispered, staring at Marcus. "You're dead. I went to your memorial. I've been to your grave." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down, with Maya standing nervously nearby. "The grave is empty, David. I've been alive this whole time, just lost." For the next 2 hours, in that small coffee shop, Marcus recounted his story. David asked question after question, details about their work together, personal memories, technical specifications that only the real Marcus would know. With each correct answer, David's expression shifted from disbelief to wonder to barely contained rage. "Richard told us you were dead," David said finally, his voice shaking. "He said he'd identified your body himself, that it was too damaged for viewing, which is why the casket was closed. He cried at your funeral, Marcus. He gave a speech about honoring your legacy. And then he started selling off everything you'd built." David pulled out his phone, scrolling through files. "I didn't leave because of personal reasons. I left because I knew something was wrong. Richard was making decisions that contradicted everything you believed in, dismantling projects you'd been passionate about. I tried to question him and was forced out. I've been documenting everything since then, just in case. I don't know, I guess I hope somehow you'd come back." The reunion between Marcus and David became the foundation of their strategy. David had maintained detailed records of Richard's actions, questionable transactions, and corporate decisions that suggested embezzlement. More importantly, David could testify to Marcus's identity, providing witness statements backed by years of close collaboration. As they planned their next steps, Maya watched Marcus come fully alive for the first time since she'd known him. This was who he truly was, a brilliant strategist, a leader, someone who inspired loyalty in people like David. It was both exciting and terrifying. The man she'd loved on the streets was becoming someone powerful, someone who moved in a world she'd never been part of. That night, in their hotel room, Marcus held her close. "Are you scared?" he asked. Maya nodded. "Terrified," she admitted. "Of what happens next. Of losing you to that other life." Marcus kissed her forehead. "You're not losing me. You're the one who found me. And our daughter is going to have everything, including 2 parents who love her." Maya wanted to believe him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. With David's testimony, medical evidence, and Jennifer Kim's legal preparation, they were ready to make Marcus's return public. The strategy was carefully calculated. First, file legal documents challenging Marcus's death certificate and demanding immediate DNA testing. Second, call a press conference to announce his survival before Richard could mount a defense. Third, freeze all corporate assets pending resolution of Marcus's identity claim. Jennifer warned them that Richard would fight viciously. He had billions of dollars worth of reasons to discredit Marcus's claim. "He'll say you're an imposter, that you're mentally ill, that this is an elaborate fraud," Jennifer cautioned. "We need to be prepared for everything." The legal filing hit the courts on a Monday morning. By noon, news of Marcus Blackwell's potential survival had exploded across financial news networks. Jennifer had strategically leaked the story to a technology journalist known for thorough, credible reporting. The article detailed Marcus's disappearance, the suspicious circumstances of Richard's takeover, and the medical evidence supporting Marcus's identity claim. Richard Chin issued an immediate statement through his lawyers, calling the claim a cruel hoax perpetrated by con artists and promising to vigorously defend against this fraudulent attack on Mr. Blackwell's legacy. The press conference was scheduled for Wednesday, just enough time for media attention to build to a fever pitch. Maya, now 7 months pregnant, stood backstage at the hotel conference room, watching Marcus review his statement with Jennifer. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO he claimed to be, wearing a tailored suit that David had purchased. But Maya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands occasionally trembled. This was the moment that would define their future. If the public believed him, they'd have everything. If they didn't, Marcus would face fraud charges and Maya would be branded a gold-digging accomplice. Walking onto that stage, facing dozens of cameras and reporters, Marcus transformed. His voice was steady, his manner confident but not arrogant. He told his story clearly. The accident, the head injury, the years lost to brain damage and homelessness, the woman who'd saved him by treating him with basic human dignity. He presented the medical evidence. Dr. Chin joined him on stage, explaining his injury and recovery in clinical terms that carried weight. David testified to Marcus's identity, recounting specific conversations and knowledge that no imposter could possess. And finally, Marcus revealed something that made the room gasp: the Wilson Protocol, a proprietary algorithm he'd developed for Blackwell Technologies that had never been publicly documented. Only 3 people ever knew the full specification, Marcus said. Myself, David, and our lead developer, who died 3 years ago. If Richard Chen can produce the protocol's full documentation, I'll withdraw my claim right now. Richard, watching the press conference from his office, knew he was trapped. He couldn't produce the Wilson Protocol documentation because Marcus had kept it separate from general corporate files, stored in an encrypted format that only Marcus could access. The press conference turned the narrative decisively in Marcus's favor. Public opinion, always hungry for an underdog story, embraced the tale of the billionaire who'd survived against impossible odds. Social media exploded with support for Marcus and condemnation of Richard. Corporate lawyers began circling Blackwell Technologies, sensing vulnerability and potential lawsuits. The legal battle lasted 3 more weeks. DNA evidence definitively proved Marcus's identity. They'd obtained samples from his old dentist's records and from personal items stored in a warehouse. Forensic accountants uncovered Richard's embezzlement, revealing that he'd siphoned nearly $300 million from the company. Faced with overwhelming evidence and criminal charges, Richard's legal team negotiated a settlement. He would surrender control of Blackwell Technologies, repay the stolen funds, and avoid prison in exchange for his cooperation. Standing in the courtroom when the judge ruled in his favor, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. He'd won. He'd reclaimed his life, his company, and his identity. That night, back in their hotel suite, Maya watched Marcus scroll through financial reports and corporate emails, already diving back into the business world. "Are you sure you want this?" she asked suddenly. "All of this." Marcus looked up, seeming to really see her for the first time in weeks. He crossed the room and knelt before her, placing his hands gently on her swollen belly. "What I want is you, this baby, and a chance to build something meaningful. Yes, I want my company back. But not for the power or the money, for the opportunity to do things right, to be the person you believed I was even when I didn't know who I was." He looked up at her, and Maya saw tears in his eyes. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because of the baby, not because of the money, but because in my darkest moment, you are my light. I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift." The wedding was small and intimate, held in the hospital chapel where Marcus had begun his recovery. Dr. Chin attended, along with Helen from the shelter, Patricia the social worker, David and Jennifer, and a handful of others who'd helped them through their journey. Maya wore a simple white dress that accommodated her now 8-month pregnant belly, and she never felt more beautiful. As they exchanged vows, Maya reflected on the impossible chain of events that had led them here. A year ago, she'd been sleeping under an overpass. Now she was marrying a billionaire. The transformation seemed like a fairy tale, but the reality was far more complex. Returning to normal life proved challenging for both of them. Marcus threw himself into rebuilding Blackwell Technologies, working 18-hour days to undo the damage Richard had caused. The company had lost talent, contracts, and reputation during Richard's tenure. Marcus implemented sweeping changes, bringing back key employees who'd left, restructuring divisions, and recommitting to the innovative projects that had made Blackwell Technologies successful. The business press praised his comeback, calling it one of the most remarkable resurrections in corporate history. But Maya saw the toll it took on him. The exhaustion, the stress, the way he sometimes woke from nightmares about being back on the streets. For Maya, the transition was even more jarring. She'd gone from homeless to billionaire's wife overnight, and the culture shock was overwhelming. Marcus bought them a penthouse apartment with views of the city, but Maya felt lost in its vastness. She had staff now, a housekeeper, a personal assistant, a driver, and she didn't know how to relate to them. Were they employees or helpers? Friends or servants? Shopping for clothes in designer boutiques, she felt the staff's barely concealed judgment of her background. She overheard whispers calling her a gold digger, speculating that she'd trapped Marcus with a pregnancy. The looks cut deeper than any hardship she'd faced on the streets. The most difficult adjustment came from Marcus's social circle. His return brought invitations to charity galas, corporate dinners, and society events where Maya felt completely out of place. The women wore gowns that cost more than Maya had earned in her entire life before meeting Marcus. They discussed summer homes in the Hamptons, private jets, and social dynamics that Maya couldn't begin to navigate. At one particularly painful dinner party, a socialite asked Maya where she'd attended college. When Maya explained she'd never finished high school, the woman's eyebrows rose. "How interesting," she said, her tone making clear it was anything but. Marcus, seated across the table, caught the exchange and immediately stood. "We're leaving," he announced, taking Maya's hand and walking out despite protests from their hosts. In the car, Maya broke down. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I don't belong in your world, Marcus. These people look at me like I'm nothing, like I'm just some homeless woman who got lucky. And maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just fooling myself thinking I can be part of this life." Marcus pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "They're the ones who are nothing," he said fiercely. "Those people have never struggled, never fought for survival, never shown real courage. You're worth 1,000 of them, Maya. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be in our lives." He kissed her forehead. "We'll find our own way. We don't need their approval." That night marked a turning point. Marcus began declining social invitations from his old circle, instead focusing on building a life that worked for both of them. He hired a tutor for Maya so she could get her GED and, if she wanted, pursue college later. They established a foundation dedicated to helping homeless people, with a special focus on those with mental illness and pregnant women, combining their experiences into something meaningful. Maya took on a role at the foundation, finding purpose in helping people who'd been in her position. And as her due date approached, they prepared for parenthood together, attending classes and reading books. Two people from impossible backgrounds determined to give their daughter everything, including the most important thing: love. Marcus had his company, but Maya was building something too: a family, a purpose, and proof that sometimes the most unlikely love stories have the happiest endings. Maya went into labor 3 weeks before her due date, during a foundation meeting ironically scheduled to discuss their new homeless outreach program. Her water broke while she was presenting a proposal to provide mobile medical care to street populations. Marcus, who'd been on a conference call in his office, received the panicked message and broke every traffic law getting to the hospital. He arrived to find Maya in a delivery room, breathing through contractions with a determination he recognized, the same fierce strength that had helped her survive 3 years on the streets. "You made it," she gasped, reaching for his hand. "I told them not to start without you." The labor was long and difficult. 18 hours of pain, exhaustion, and fear that something would go wrong. Maya's years of poor nutrition and street living had left her body weakened, and the doctors monitored her carefully. Marcus never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. In those hours, stripped of wealth and status, they were just two people bringing a life into the world, scared and hopeful in equal measure. When their daughter finally emerged, tiny and red-faced and screaming with impressive volume, Maya and Marcus both wept. "She's perfect," Marcus whispered, cutting the umbilical cord with shaking hands. "She's absolutely perfect." They named her Hope Catherine Blackwell, hope for what she represented, and Catherine after the shelter that had saved Maya. Holding her daughter for the first time, Maya felt a completeness she hadn't known was possible. This tiny person, just minutes old, represented everything she'd fought for. Hope would never know hunger, never know cold, never know the fear of sleeping on dangerous streets. But more than material security, Hope would know love. As Marcus gazed at his daughter with wonder, Maya knew that their unlikely journey had led to exactly where they were meant to be. The first year of Hope's life was transformative for all of them. Marcus reduced his work hours, determined not to be an absentee father. He'd reclaimed his company, but he refused to lose his family to it. They established routines, morning walks with Hope in the stroller, evening story times. Retry. YS. Continue. Edit. Weekend trips to the park where they'd once been homeless. Marcus insisted on these visits to their old neighborhood, wanting to remember where they'd come from. They'd stop by St. Catherine's Shelter, where Hope became a beloved visitor, passed around by staff and residents who saw her as a symbol of possibility. Helen, who'd first helped Maya, became Hope's honorary grandmother, always ready with advice and encouragement. Maya completed her GED with honors and enrolled in community college, studying social work. She wanted formal credentials to complement her lived experience, believing she could be more effective in helping others with proper training. Marcus supported her fully, arranging his schedule to care for Hope during Maya's classes. Watching his daughter, changing diapers, soothing her cries, these mundane tasks meant more to him than any corporate victory. He'd lost years to his injury, lost himself completely, and Hope represented a second chance at life, at being present and purposeful. The foundation they'd established grew beyond their initial vision. With Marcus's resources and Maya's insight, they created a comprehensive program addressing homelessness from multiple angles: immediate shelter and food, mental health services, job training, and long-term housing support. They hired formerly homeless individuals as staff members, believing in lived experience as expertise. The crown jewel was the Marcus and Maya Blackwell Recovery Center, a state-of-the-art facility offering medical care, psychiatric services, and rehabilitation specifically designed for homeless people with brain injuries or mental illness. Dr. Chen served as medical director, bringing the same dedication she'd shown Marcus to hundreds of other patients. One afternoon, 2 years after Hope's birth, Maya was working at the foundation office when a young woman entered, clearly homeless and visibly pregnant. She was maybe 19, with frightened eyes and clothes that had seen better days. "I heard you help people like me," the girl said quietly. Maya felt time collapse, seeing herself in this young woman's face. "Yes," Maya said gently, coming around her desk. "Yes, we do. What's your name?" As the girl told her story, family rejection, job loss, pregnancy discovered too late for easy choices, Maya held her hand and listened with the empathy of someone who'd walked that exact path. Over the following months, Maya personally mentored this young woman, named Jessica, helping her navigate pregnancy, secure housing, and plan for her future. She shared her own story, not as inspiration porn, but as honest testimony of struggle and survival. When Jessica's baby was born, a healthy boy she named Marcus, after the man whose foundation had saved her, Maya stood in the delivery room the same way Helen had once stood with her. The cycle of helping continued, each person who'd been helped reaching back to lift someone else. Marcus's company flourished under his renewed leadership. Blackwell Technologies developed groundbreaking AI applications for social good, including systems to identify and assist vulnerable populations, algorithms to optimize resource distribution for nonprofits, and technology to connect homeless individuals with services. The company became known not just for innovation but for ethical leadership. Marcus spoke openly about his time on the streets, using his platform to combat stigma around mental illness and homelessness. His vulnerability inspired other executives to address these issues, creating a ripple effect throughout the business community. On Hope's third birthday, they held a celebration that perfectly captured their blended life. The penthouse was filled with children from the shelter's family wing, playing alongside the children of Marcus's business associates. David's kids taught Hope to code simple games on a tablet while formerly homeless teens, now in the Foundation's job training program, helped serve cake. Helen sat with Dr. Chin, discussing new treatment protocols while Patricia coordinated a balloon release. It was chaotic and joyful and perfectly imperfect, a family that had been assembled from broken pieces, proving that wholeness could emerge from brokenness. That evening, after guests had left and Hope was asleep, Maya and Marcus stood on their balcony overlooking the city. Below, they could see the streets where they'd once struggled, the overpass where they'd first connected, the hospital where Marcus had been reborn. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked quietly. "If you could go back and prevent the accident, prevent everything that happened, would you?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, considering. "The accident destroyed me," he said finally. "Those years on the streets were hell. I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone." He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "But if I hadn't lost everything, I never would have found what truly matters. I never would have found you. We were in the right place at the right time," Maya said, but Marcus shook his head. "No," he corrected gently. "We were in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. But we chose to see each other's humanity anyway. That choice, your choice to help a madman, my choice to trust a homeless woman, that's what changed everything." He pulled her close. "Our daughter is going to grow up knowing that story. She'll know that her parents met in poverty, loved in adversity, and built something meaningful from nothing. She'll understand that wealth isn't what defines us. Our choices do." Inside, they could hear Hope stirring from her nap, making the sweet babbling sounds of a child waking happy. Maya kissed Marcus softly and went to get their daughter, this miracle they'd created against impossible odds. As she lifted Hope from her crib, the little girl wrapped her arms around Maya's neck and whispered, "Love you, Mama." In that moment, Maya understood that every hardship, every cold night, every moment of despair had been a step on the path to this perfect present. She'd been a poor homeless girl who got pregnant by a man everyone called crazy. But she'd also been brave enough to love when love seemed foolish, strong enough to fight when quitting seemed easier, and wise enough to recognize that sometimes the most broken people can create the most beautiful futures. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, messy, difficult, and absolutely worth every struggle. And it was just beginning.